So the Town of Barnstable Shellfish Committee meeting is called to order on December 13th, 2023. It's approximately 6 o'clock p.m. And I first must read a notice of recording. Please note that tonight's meeting is recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel, and in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting, and if so, please make their presence known. Anybody else taping this meeting? So nobody's made their presence known, so I presume that they are not. First order of business is to approve the meeting minutes from November the 8th. They've been circulated. I'll entertain a motion to accept them as presented.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes of November 8th as published.
Great. Do I hear a second? Discussion? No discussion. I'll call for a vote. Please indicate by saying aye if you approve the minutes as presented. Aye.
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 We don't need to do a roll call. They're approved.
We don't, do we need to do a roll?
Nope.
No.
Because it's not on Zoom, we're present.
Oh.
Comments at this time, I'll reserve my comments. Natural Resources Report, item number 3 on the agenda. Shellfish growing area update, please, Amy.
Okay, so since you guys met in October, we have had just a couple of openings. One, East Bay and the Centerville River opened on time, December 1st. Don't know why it looks like that. There we go. So we have a couple like little small micro pollution closures around known point source pollution areas, and then we have the 2 signs that close off the rest of the Centerville River. This is the map of Centerville, just to show you kind of the zoomed out version. Ooh, it's slow today. All right, well, that's fun. That's not I have this stuff loaded. This is not my fault. We did water quality sampling with DMF today. So I should have the results for that late tomorrow afternoon, which is going to make it really interesting for posting, but fingers and toes crossed. All the conditional areas will open that are currently closed, the Barnstable Great Marsh areas. And so this is hopefully what the maps will all look like by Friday. So does anyone have any questions about shellfish area maps?
Committee?
No.
Public? No.
Okay, so next I have the monthly propagation report, which was supplied by Devin Nunez. So if you have any questions that I cannot answer, as I am like the business end of the stick nowadays and very rarely get to do anything propagation related, please reach out to her directly. So they're still currently maintaining 246 predator exclusion nets. North side nets are easy to maintain this time of year. They're only dealing with slight sanding over, which can get worse in winter months. South side nets in the 3 bays are covered with dying codium and other seaweed, but it's been coming off easily. They use Grandy grooms, which are like shag carpet cleaners, to do that. They've been going over the same area several times to ensure the nets are clean. They received the remainder of the oysters from the Uglies Purchase Program. Those have been planted at Scudder Lane Recreational Area on the north side and Bridge Street Recreational Area on the south side. And they've ordered their oyster and quahog seed for year 2024. They'll be purchasing from ARC in Muscungus. ARC was the company that won the county bid for 2024, as they were, as is common, the only ones who bid. Annual funded testing from the county was done to check on the status of dermo in the 3 bays. A sample of oysters from Katuitt Town Dock are currently being tested. On the north side, we still have 38 oyster trays left to plant on bottom at Scudder and are hoping to finish that off tomorrow. And they're currently moving gear out of the propagation area and putting racks out deep before the first freeze, which is just kind of a standard practice for anyone that recreationally harvests over there. You'll notice that the propagation area closure at Scudder gets smaller the longer we go into winter as we move stuff deeper. On the south side, they're finishing planting the remainder oyster bags from our propagation area in Katuitt Bay, and those are being planted at Bridge Street Recreational Area. Constantly you've been checking in the quahogs being overwintered in the Hooper's Island Flepsy at Prince Cove, and as of this point, everything looks good. We have the sort of season to date number of permits that we've been checking since the opening of oyster season. These are our weekly totals from the various areas. Obviously, the vast majority of people that are shellfishing go to Barnstable Harbor, but we do have, Bay Street's been pretty cleared out, which is great because that's what we've wanted over the past few years to get, those oysters that had a moderate infection of dermo out of there. We didn't see any mass die-off of any of the stuff there, so we think we managed the moderate infection well. And then next year, we're just going to continue to let it lie fallow and only plant quahogs there. And then these are the number of pecks harvested of various species, oysters and quahogs from various locations, bearing in mind that with the exception of Bay Street, the weekly limit is a half a peck. So, even though it's showing like you got about 180 pecks harvested, that's more like 360 people were checked with their harvest. So solid harvest so far throughout the season. We have seen a bit of a drop off, as we often do between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then it usually ramps up again for New Year's, but the tides are kind of funky going into the holiday season this year, like very close to sunset. So I don't know how busy it will actually be. Does anyone have any questions about the propagation report?
Propagation. The nets on the south side for quahogs,
Uh-huh.
what year class are the nets still on them? Are they on-
Various. There's this year's seed, there's the seed the year before, and also some nets from the year before that. Typically, once the net looks like it's at about like 60 to 70% legal, they'll pull the net and then start digging that stuff up and relaying it around 3 bays in designated relay areas typically, but also in other areas that still have suitable shoreline left to plant. Good?
I got one more question.
Sure.
The overwintering in the flub seed of the quahog seed, I've asked around, people have experience, have never heard of that.
Yeah.
Chances are,
It's
from
definitely
what I
not something
understand,
that
they are
we,
going to die.
yeah, it's not something that we wanted to do. I had loosely suggested that maybe in like a Hail Mary, you just kind of chuck stuff out along Great Bay Road because it's productive bottom, but it's so late in the season, and I don't make those calls.
Yeah, they were talking about it last week, but I didn't want to say nothing because I wasn't sure. I've never heard of it before, but
Yeah.
you got to put them in the ground or chances are they ain't going to make it.
Yep, that is true. Anyone else? Okay, so
Public question? Okay.
year-to-date permit sales, starting next month, we'll go back in, we're starting the first cycle of January 15 expirations, so we can start comparing like this month last year compared to this month this year, next month, right? No, the new permits go on sale. But so far, this year, we have sold 1,533 resident permits, 528 non-resident permits, 1,068 resident senior permits, 53 non-resident veteran permits, and 86 non-veteran senior permits. Seasonal permits obviously expired in September, so that stays static at 71, for a grand total of 3,339 recreational permits sold. This year, really, $164,000, and $53. Does anyone have any questions about that?
So there are no licenses that will spill over into next year. They're all going to expire 1/1?
So they expire January 15th of 2024. They're now good from January 15th of any given year through the 14th of the following year.
Okay.
But the email blast out to the recreational fishery for renewals will go out next week. And if you choose to renew, because your 5-digit permit number will now stay the same, you can start using your 2024 if you renew early, effective January 1st.
Gotcha. Thank you.
A couple of other fun things. Are we down to like the last thing finally here, are we? Update on floating gear in Barnstable Harbor. I went before the Waterways Committee in November, And they were my last piece of vetting, and they said, okay, yeah, we have no problem with this. So each 2-acre parcel that's out there can, if you so choose, apply to have one piece of floating gear that you can use for staging product. Specifically during Vibrio season, obviously it's not a good idea to have floating gear out there like this time of year, any gear really. And I know that everyone's working on getting stuff in. So they provided me with a 91-page Mass General Permit instruction manual that I think will allow us, because these are relatively small changes, to each person that wants to pursue this, fill out what they call a self-verification notification. It does also come along with a lot of checks and balances, and I have correspondence into Christine Jasek at Army Corps to figure out exactly what's going to be required. And Jen Bunnell has graciously volunteered herself to be the guinea pig and go through this application process with me. So once we figure that out, it'll be a lot easier for everybody, but effectively, if you choose to go this way, you're no longer covered by the Army Corps permit that was, given to the town. You'll have your own Army Corps permit issued to the individual, which is not different from all the Southside growers have their own. And then the last thing, I think, is shellfish-related due dates and deadlines, because this is renewal season for literally everybody. If you're a grower and you have not paid your acreage fees, they are due, it's January 2nd, because it's that Tuesday by the end of the year, along with your proof of domicile. So that's Tuesday, January 2nd. We already covered recreational permits. If you have a commercial permit and you're interested in keeping it, your placeholder is that $5 in filling out and signing your renewal application by the end of January. And then that kicks in the 90 days for you to give us your domicile, a copy of your commercial permit. We no longer require a yearly catch report because you have to report to SAFIS. And similarly, we had a little issue with the annual reports that were sent out to the growers initially because they still had that notary requirement on there, but we've fixed that document and resent it out to everyone. So you still have to sign it, but there is no more notary requirement for annual reporting. And then we already have one person who said they're not renewing their commercial permit. Russell White will no longer be in the fishery with us. He's been in the fishery for, I want to say, like 40 or 50 years at this point. But he's got a bum shoulder, so he's not renewing. And so we will be holding the commercial lottery on February 1st. I think that's it.
Questions from the committee? Public? Oh, Al, go ahead.
The county bid for the shellfish? Mm-hmm. That was, ARC got that bid? Mm-hmm. Again, because they were the only ones that bid, I guess you would say?
I don't personally know
Okay.
the propagation team. The biologist and the technician gets that email from Josh Reitzma. But, yeah, to my knowledge, yeah.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge.
Yep.
You could ask Josh. He's the one who coordinates all of that.
I'll ask him.
Public? No, okay. Anything else, Amy?
Just the new business.
Okay, I'm going to move on to new business. Apprentice commercial shellfishing permit procedure and regulation discussion, number 4.1.
Yeah, so Mr. Ron Crisp had contacted me recently. He has a daughter that was interested. She's like very outdoorsy, constantly outside, loves working with shellfish, has done some work with Paul Hamlin prior, and was interested in the apprentice program. And the problem in this case is that she will be 16 in October of 2024. And while she could make the 400 hours, she will not have 2 years under the apprenticeship program, which is required. So my question to the committee is, should it be 2 years to get the 400 hours? Does age 16 make sense? Should it be someone under the age of 18 and then on their 18th birthday they can apply for that 48th permit? In terms of sponsorship, can it be through more than one commercial permit holder or stay restricted to one? Would work on a shellfish grant also be considered toward the 400 hours if, like in the case of Paul Hamlin, he's a grower that also has a commercial permit in town? and what type of proof should be required to show the 400 hours have been completed. Because when I was a seasonal employee, I think was when Jacob Burnham was just first getting into the fishery back in 2004, 2005, that kind of area. And he's the last person that I know of to be in the apprentice program, but there have been a couple of people in recent years that have expressed interest, and I'm just wondering if now would be a good time, since we are constantly reviewing regulations,
Yeah.
to take a peek at this one. So I just wanted to see what the temperature of the committee and any public here is.
Commercial,
Yeah.
Yeah,
commercial permit.
the
So
apprentice.
currently, the regulation says 16 and 400 hours over
Yeah.
2 years?
Yep.
And then,
Into
and
one
then you're
sponsor.
eligible for, what's the statute actually, or the regulation actually say?
So, if you want me to read it out, the apprentice commercial shellfishing permit, the town manager or shellfish constable may issue an apprentice commercial shellfishing permit to a resident child who's sponsored by a town of Barnstable commercial shellfishing permit holder. Must be under the age of 16, and the apprenticeship shall expire on the 16th birthday, but then it requires the 2 years of having done those 400 hours. No explanation of what type of proof you need to show that you've done the 400 hours, but you do have to take the boater safety course.
They can then apply on their 16th birthday for their own permit.
Yeah, pursuant to normal commercial shellfish licensing procedures, yeah. And in this case, because it's a closed fishery, this would be the only way in which we would go from a 47-person fishery to a 48-person fishery at this moment in time.
Right. Committee?
Seems.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
It's like a,
this is the first I'm seeing this, so I'm trying to process it all. The math doesn't make sense. If you have to be under 16, but you have to get it done by the time you're 16, then it should be like you have to be at 14 or less. So
And that was kind of what Ron and I were talking about on the phone, was like, what 14-year-old knows that you're the exception, Paul. You're the exception. What 14-year-old, except Paul Hamlin, knows that, you want to dedicate that amount of your time, which largely has to be done during the summer months because most of these children are in school. So it just seemed like maybe it might be appropriate to have it like between the ages of 14 and 18. And then, once you're 18, state of Massachusetts, you're pretty much considered an adult, maybe not to your parents, but definitely according to the state. And so at that point, it would make more sense to me, like you probably have a car at that point. It'd be easier for you to get a transaction card, all of those things. To just kind of trying to revisit the conversation and bring it into like 2023.
400 hours seems like a lot, too.
It does.
It's way too much.
Yeah. It's like,
Ooh, I don't know about that.
well, I think it's,
I mean, if you're 16, let's say you start when you're 16, right? So 24 months, 2 hours a month.
Are you showing us your math skills right now? Is that what you're doing?
It's just, if you did a couple hours a month for 2 years, you'd be now 18.
But are you
should
really an
know
apprentice?
What you want to do,
Yeah.
right? Whether you want to do it or
But
not.
if you do it during the summer and you do 40 hours a week, your 10-week vacation, your summer vacation, you would get 400 hours if you wanted to do it all in one summer.
You can't work 40 hours a week.
So would 20 be appropriate? 20?
I don't know.
20 hours a week, would
You
that be
answer the question.
appropriate?
I have no idea. I've never heard of this. I still have one more question. After you do this, so do you get a commercial license in the town? If you go through all this, you add it to the list and you actually get a commercial license?
so
Is that what I'm understanding here?
the reason they created the apprentice commercial shellfishing permit, I believe, was at the same time that they had the closure of the fishery. And it's the only way for new people interested in the industry to get in outside of the lottery. Yeah. So this wouldn't take a spot away from like a vacancy. So say, for instance, I have that vacancy that I know of right now that will be offered to whoever's number one in the lottery this year. That's separate from the commercial apprentice program. It's a way for somebody to get dedicated to a craft and to then, similar to an electrician's apprentice, plumbing
They go into
apprentice.
the lottery then?
No. Then they're eligible for their own license. And then the number of licenses expands.
Yep.
So then you do want to keep the hours
Expands?
relatively challenging.
That's what I'm getting. If you-
Right,
Absolutely.
that's why I'm saying maybe 2 years is a bit
So for young kids,
stringent, and you start at such a
pretty
young
good.
age. I think, like 300 or 400 hours over the course of 4 years, if you're doing it in the summertime, is attainable. Especially if
A little more
you-
reasonable.
It's more reasonable, especially if you're working with somebody who not only has a wild harvester permit, but also has an aquaculture farm.
Sure.
So I think, we could like build different requirements that would make more sense.
Is there any study involved? Is there any, like, I'll call it book learning, reading up about this that you could put towards your hours?
There's nothing in the requirements of the regulation currently, other than you have to take the boater safety course, which, really, if you want a wild harvest, you have to do it to learn it. There's like no online class for how to commercially dig quahogs or softshell clams.
Can you work as a aquaculturist? In other words, could somebody work for me and then get a commercial license because they were apprenticed in the aquaculture business?
I think that you still need to have piece of the component tied to a person, to a sponsor with a wild permit. I think that if you have a sponsor who's a wild harvester who also is a grower, that you can do both, and I would consider it reasonable to then consider those hours worked on the farm towards that 400 hours.
Yeah.
But that's just me personally.
And because you don't want somebody to get in front of the line without actually doing the commercial stuff.
Right, exactly. So that's why I'm saying 400 hours is a lot. So if you are, if you can show that X amount of that time was dedicated specifically to wild harvesting, learning the tools, learning the techniques, making those transactions at wholesale dealer facilities, et cetera, that there's nothing wrong with also learning the aquaculture aspect of things tied in with that, but the focus primarily should be on the wild harvest.
So it's not less than so many hours, like 200 or 300 hours in the wild,
Yeah.
but total of 4, and part of those 4 can be 100, at an aquaculture farm. Mr. Hamlin, state your name and then your.
Come up to a microphone, please.
Yeah, you need to be at a microphone.
I'm Paul Hamlin, aquaculturist in Barnstable. I went through the apprentice program, so I know all about it. I started when I was like 12.
Get closer to the mic, please.
My stepfather had a commercial permit, so I worked side by side with him every summer, got my hours, and got to learn the commercial side, the commercial permit side of it. The aquaculture really has nothing to do with it because, you do harvest some quahogs, but it's mainly oysters, and there's no commercial oyster in Barnstable. So that doesn't really make sense. I feel like the apprentice program, you have to be kind of side by side a commercial harvester, not an aquaculturist. It just doesn't really make sense. It's a totally different business.
So then for somebody who is primarily a grower but still holds a wild harvester permit, do you think that it would be appropriate to have one primary sponsor but allow that individual to work with a number of wild harvesters to get the hours and the experience?
So would the time as working on the aquaculture farm, would that count?
No,
towards your-
these are the questions that I'm asking. I have no
Yeah.
idea. I'm just brainstorming how this regulation could kind of be brought into the now and be something that somebody could do, because you were 12 when in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like a while ago. It's kind of a different world now.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah, I think the point I'm trying to get across is I think it needs to be, the hours need to be with a commercial harvester, not with an aquaculturist.
Okay.
I don't think so.
So say if you were this young lady's sponsor as a wild harvester, you can take her out like some hours, but could
Yeah,
she
exactly.
also like work with Joe wild
Yeah.
harvesting and
Yeah.
have
Oh,
those
yeah.
hours
Yeah.
count?
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
you would just be the primary sponsor, kind of like you'd be responsible for having her under your wing.
I see,
But she could
yes.
do work with other wild harvesters, because in your instance, you don't use your commercial permit all too much. You're
No, I
mostly
don't, no.
farming.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking. It's gonna be
But-
hard to get your 400 hours in that case.
Right.
But I also do, on the other side of that, I do harvest a lot of quahogs, and some of the techniques are the same. So I don't know how you bridge that gap, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know when you say, okay, now we're learning how to commercially harvest quahogs. Now your time starts. Like, I don't know how to do that.
Okay, so keeping it just strictly with a wild harvester, but not potentially limiting it to just having the one sponsor, like having the one sponsor, but not limiting it to doing the hours with just one wild harvester.
Yes.
Would be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention too is the age, the 16 to 18 age. I feel like you could make that so you get your hours before the age of 18, but you're eligible to get your license anytime between 16 and 18 when you reach that 400 hours.
Yeah.
Because now for me personally, when I turned 16, I had my hours and I was like, all right, I got my license, I got my driver's license, I'm good to go now, I got a boat and I'm on my way.
Okay.
So to wait until 18 when you have your driver's license, and it would, and you have your hours, like I don't think they should wait until 18 to be able to get their commercial permit.
So it should
But
be like when
expand
the
it.
hours are
Yeah,
done.
between 16 and 18, you can't get your.
Upon completion of hours in the border
Exactly.
safety course.
Yep,
Okay.
that's what I think.
How do you feel about the 400 hours? Do you think that's reasonable?
I do. I think you need some time. Yeah, to learn everything. Yeah, I do.
I recall when we vetted this, we came up with this draft years ago. And the 400 hours was a negotiated amount between wild harvesters, primarily, that's all it was. The only input was really from wild harvesters. But 400 was like reasonable at the time. Not 200, 400.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of moving it from 16 to 18. I also like that comment about any time between 16 and 18, you're eligible so long as you do your hours in your boater safety course.
Yeah, yeah. If you had been working from age 14 to 16 and you have your 400 hours, and now you're like, okay, well now I have to wait till 18 to get.
It doesn't make sense.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you, as a committee, be amenable to me crafting a regulatory change for discussion in the January meeting?
I'll take a straw poll.
Why don't we just vote on it?
Oh, it's not an agenda
Okay.
item, so let's just,
It's not written.
yeah. So what do we think? Do we want to pursue this so that we can vote on it at our next meeting?
It looks like it needs cleaning up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The verifiable nature of the hours is kind of not a bone of contention, but it's a question.
So how about just like similar to what we're doing today, draft regulation for continued discussion, edits possible, and then vote when you're ready to vote on it?
Does that sound okay to the committee?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Great.
I just got one more question about it.
Yeah.
Now
No,
the
we're done.
apprentice-
We're done.
Are they allowed to like rake with the rake and all that stuff?
Yeah, they have to be working side by side with whoever's sponsoring them for,
They're allowed
those
to have a rake
hours.
and do all the, just like everybody
Yep,
else.
and they
Okay.
have to be, they're not allowed to do any of the work on their own. And yeah, and they obviously have to learn about the sales, but are conducting the sales, so.
Gentleman has a question behind you.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
Yep, go to a microphone.
Well, commercial digger. I guess I just had a couple questions about, so just to be clear, it does not have to be your child, just needs to be a resident child. And then any commercial permit holder can then apprentice that child, so it doesn't have to be actual kin.
Yeah, so long as they're a town of Barnstable commercial
Okay.
permit holder, you could offer to sponsor the child.
Okay, and then I know that it was discussed about the lottery, that like there's an open vacancy. If she was able to get in, that wouldn't take that spot. Is there a cap upon apprentice spots? Because I do have young children, this is something that I've actually been reading upon lately, so I'm,
Isn't now.
No.
so there is no cap upon that side?
Nope,
Okay,
Nothing in the regulation
okay.
that states that.
Part of the reason
In no
was-
minimum of age, so I could, Unless they get, so the minimum is getting the boater safety, so that minimum age of attaining a boater
It currently
safety.
says that the child has to be under the age of 16 and that the apprenticeship expires upon the 16th birthday.
there's
Do
that
you want like an 8-year-old out there doing it? Probably not, you know.
No, I get
Um,
that.
There's some best management practice questions in there.
Child labor.
Is Gemma expressing interest?
Nice.
She's
bagging clams.
All right.
It's designed to bring some fresh, young blood into the industry. All right, anybody else on this topic? Great, thanks, Amy.
Yep.
You have your marching orders, kind of, sort of?
Yes, I do, yeah. I have my notes. We're good.
Great. I'll go to number 5, upcoming and old renewal and transfer hearings. First order of business hearing for the renewal of aquaculture licensed sites, SG 001, 002, 3, 6, 7, Chris Gargiulo, his address for a period of 10 years. Public hearing was 12/12, and I understand that that public hearing was continued. So I see Chris is in the audience. Just tell us what the plan is.
Pretty similar to what the
Oh,
prior.
to a microphone, please. Sorry.
State your name, Chris.
Chris Gargiulo. Basically, the application before you is similar to an application that I submitted back in 2013. The conditions of the area are all pretty similar. There's a slight reduction in the acreage due to a modification to one of the sites. Grant 3 was reduced in size. And basically, the only other addition on there was for potentially new species to cultivate, possibly scallops. So we may try that. I know it's difficult. There's a lot of controversy about the methods of trying to grow those, but if the seed's available, and we may try to give that a shot. The use of the gear would be the same. Our processes hasn't changed. We use an upweller to start our seed. We use floating bags as they move out of the upweller, and then we use different kinds of equipment like oyster flow and grows, condo cages, stackable cages, and bottom plant as well. We also grow cohogs. That seed that we get is usually between 8 and 12 millimeters in size, typically, whatever's available. Those are covered in 10X netting. It's pretty similar to how everybody grows a cohog. We don't get them small for the upweller, although we have done that in the past. And then we'll use rakes and dredges to harvest. Other than that, that's pretty much the same. I'm just looking for the renewal for the 10 years, and that's it.
Gotcha. Questions from the committee of Mr. Gargiulo? Okay. What's the status of his compliance as far as your department is concerned?
As far as my department is concerned, he is compliant. He's up to date on all his paperwork and fees. He sends in his annual reports on time. He passes his gear and boundary compliance inspections with our aquaculture specialist. A+ is Vibrio compliance. We don't have any issues with the renewal.
Okay. So we're not a regulatory committee. We can recommend approval or not recommend approval. That's about all we can do is a recommendation, and we do it to the town manager. I understand that there was a hearing yesterday that was not closed. It was open. I don't know why, but it's not closed. So he's before us seeking our recommendation to either recommend that it be continued or not. So any discussion, committee? No? Public? State your name.
Would it be all right if I sit in your chair for a minute? Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brian Wall. I'm an attorney with an office in Sandwich.
Great.
And I'm here tonight with one of my clients, Barry Cosgrove, and I represent 10 property owners on Great Island.
Okay.
And essentially, my clients have observed significant changes in the type of equipment and the type of methods that have been used on this particular grant, particularly in the last few years. And they see this opportunity, this 10-year renewal, as an opportunity for the town to take a look at those changes. And we're asking that some conditions be imposed upon the license. And with your permission, I have a brief presentation that might take about 5 or 10 minutes to go through. I loaded it onto the computer, if that's okay with you.
So I'll give you 3 minutes, and when you're ready to go, you tell me when, and I'll time you in 3 minutes.
May I respectfully object and beg your indulgence for the 5 or 10 minutes? I represent 10 different property owners, so if they all came in here tonight, they would get a
Each get 3 minutes.
which would be half an hour.
Yep.
So I promise I won't take half an hour. I would take about 5 or 10 minutes.
And is this the same presentation that you presented?
Very similar, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But
And-
I think that, with all due respect to this, this committee has a charge to review applications and make recommendations to the town manager, and I would suggest it's not just merely a thumbs up or thumbs down, but I think that you can recommend conditions on the license. And furthermore, some of the things that I want to show you on this presentation have to do with significant changes in methods and equipment that's being used, and you are the body that takes in new information, processes it, and then makes recommendations for regulatory changes. And I think that that's one of the things that the committee might want to do after it sees this presentation, because one of the things that's happened is that your regulations do say that the aquaculturist is supposed to coexist with other marine activities and the surrounding environment. And some of the changes that my clients have observed have impacts that are very different than what the on-bottom culture, aquaculture has had in the past. So therefore, I think the committee might want to see that and think about maybe coming up with some new modifications to your regulations.
You have 5 minutes.
Can I have the keyboard, Amy?
Oh,
if
yeah,
I can?
sorry. I get a little possessive over the keyboard.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And just in the interest of candor to the tribunal, my client has a few words to say and some photos to show as well, so I'll try to keep it as short as I can.
Will it be the same presentation that you're presenting now?
No, he has his own.
But you're representing him.
I am, but he's also an attorney and representing the group as well.
So who's going to speak on behalf of the group, you or him?
We both are. We have different presentations. We'll keep it short, Mr. Chairman. This is a really important matter to my clients, and this comes up once every 10 years. I would respectfully suggest that due process and the right to participate in government warrants listening to this presentation. It's not long.
And we're offering you that opportunity.
Then I'm going to take on your invitation and I'll say go at this particular point.
Okay.
The clients that I represent are on the screen there. They're 10 property owners. They all live either on Sandpoint Road or North Bay Road and have property fronting on Katuitt Bay. The reason that we're here today, as I was articulating at the beginning of my presentation, is that we are seeking an investigation into the change of operations before considering simply renewing this license for 10 years. We also have found information that suggests that the applicant does not have full federal permits in hand, and therefore that should be reviewed as well. And with regard to the changes in operations, we're asking that the committee look at the expansion of above water equipment that's come into the use of the applicant in Katuitt Bay, and to address these conditions with regard to how close they are to shore or docks, and to facilitate, as I was saying, coexistence between the property owners and the aquaculturists. And just to be very, very clear, my clients are not asking that this person not be allowed to do business. They're not asking for him to diminish or reduce his business. They're just asking that it be done in a manner that coexists with the other uses in the surrounding environment. So we're specifically suggesting to you that there have been significant increases in the amount of equipment, new and different above water equipment, and equipment that's in new locations where it was not previously, including in the Katuitt Narrows. Some photos for you to see, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is an example of the increased number of bags and equipment. This is a picture of where the cages are being put close to shore and docks, and also it's an example of the new equipment. This is the oyster grow type of equipment that we learned yesterday during the hearing that the applicant started using this in 2018, so only a little bit, maybe 5 years ago. Again, another picture of it, and what the equipment does too is it floats in the water, and what they do to do anti-fouling is they turn the equipment upside down and take the cages out and let the sun do it, and it has a very different impact, especially visually compared to past practices. It's put very close to shore, as you can see, sometimes even closer than the docks themselves. What our review of the evidence is that over the last, from 2006 to 2023, there's been a 1,100% increase in the amount of above water equipment, and it's gone into new grants that it was never in before. In our review of the records through public records requests have not seen any documentation supporting approval of this new equipment. It was said at the hearing yesterday that it was approved in 2018, but again, we haven't seen any documentation to that effect. This information comes not from us. This is not my argument. It's not my supposition. It comes from records that were submitted by the applicant, including this record, this letter from 2006 where the above water inventory was detailed. And then when my clients became aware that the license was going to be coming up for renewal, we asked the town to ask the applicant for an update, and he provided this information, and that's the information that ended up on this chart that shows this very, very significant increase in activity. What we're suggesting to you is that there's been a fundamental transformation in this particular operation. We went back to the 1995 renewal application, and it says, quote, bottom culture is employed on all grants, a minimal amount of floating tray culture for small seed, basically in grant number 3, where they were growing the seed. The current application that's before you right now says that every single oyster that they grow ends up in above water equipment at least part of its lifespan. So it's gone from completely bottom culture to significant above water culture. And a comparison confirms this, and also it's amplified by the fact that there's been a significant expansion in the business. In 1995, they planted 1 million seed. In 2023, they planted over 4.5 million seed. These new things that we're seeing and new methods that are being observed and the expansion in the business have resulted in impacts, including on the use of the waterfront, recreational boating and navigating, access to docks, scenic vistas, and property values. These changes implicate regulations. I'm sure the committee is well familiar. Chapter 130, Section 57 says grants can only be issued so as not to impair the private rights of any person or obstruct navigable waters. Your regulations require there to be a minimization of the impact on uses of the environment, and again, the word I keep using, that the scope of the license needs to coexist with the other activities, and also he has to comply with all local and all laws and permits. How is it impairing private rights? Private property owners on the water have rights that are different than upland property owners. They have what are called littoral rights. They're embodied in Chapter 91. It's the right to access the water from their property, and it's the right to access their property from the water. The photos that I've shown you have interfered with those rights. This new above water equipment is physically and different in nature and kind than what was there before, and it's interfering with littoral rights. Here are a few quick examples, and I'm going to...
Mr. Wall,
Yep.
you've now been 6 minutes.
Okay, I'm probably 3/4, 2/3 through, 9/10. I'll make it quick, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Very quickly, equipment close to shore is shown here in these photos. The equipment has come loose and impacted boats and docks. Again, it's very close to docks and navigation. And the town's wetlands regulations protect recreational activities such as fishing and shellfishing and walking and swimming, and these things that we're seeing in the water are interfering with that. Mr. Chairman, very specifically, if you would see the screen behind you, in 2007, there were 2 applications for new licenses in Pompanesett Bay. They both proposed above water gear, and the town, in very thorough, well thought out decisions, denied both of those applications. And the reasons for denial are set forth in summary on the screen, but essentially they said that aquaculture above water, near shore, obstructs navigation, interferes with impacts, scenic vistas, and all those rights that I talked about, boating, fishing, shellfishing, etc. What we're suggesting to you is that the license renewal now has changed from bottom culture to above water culture, and that fundamental change now makes this operation the same as what the town has denied in the past. We're not asking that it be denied, but we're asking that it not be business as usual, just a standard renewal, but that you look at how this thing has changed over time and impose reasonable conditions that balance the rights between the aquaculturists and the property owners that live nearby. The second point that I want to make, and I'll make it very quickly, is the applicant needs a federal permit. And our research indicates that the federal government issued what's called a letter of permission to the entire area. And the letter of permission contains certain guardrails that say you can't interfere with navigation, and it limits above water use of the water sheet. But if you look at the letter behind you, the letter of permission is not a permit. What happens is the letter of permission says that each aquaculturist needs their own specific permit. So in other words, the letter of permission sets forth these guidelines and guardrails, but requires each person to get a permit. This is the cover letter that we received in a public records request that says enclosed is your permit. But we talked with the people at the federal authorities up in Concord, and they did not have the permit. They said that they sent it to the town. We asked the town to give us the permit. The town did not have it. We learned, we also asked Katuitt Oyster to provide us a copy, and they chose not to. In the hearing yesterday, it was said that the permit has been obtained and filed with the town, but we haven't yet seen it, and we are still convinced that there's probably some confusion over this and that we have not seen the permit. Why is that important? Your regulations say that he has to have all his permits in order to do business. Secondly, what that permit is going to contain conditions regarding use of above water equipment, and it's important to see if it's allowed at all, and if it's allowed, whether or not what's happening is done consistent with those permits. And I think it's a very important point, and I would respectfully suggest that this committee should not make its recommendation until it's assured that those permits actually exist. And lastly, with regard to all permits, we also suggest that this new above water equipment is a bottom anchored raft or float and requires a 10A permit from the harbor master, and it's our understanding they don't have one. And similarly, we would suggest that this new activity triggers the Wetlands Protection Act, and they don't have wetlands permits. So we would submit to you that the license is not in a form to be acted upon by this committee, and it should be continued like the other licensing hearing was. And I appreciate the fact that you've let me talk. Again, I'll conclude by simply saying my clients are not asking that this be shut down or reduced. They just want conditions that balance the interests. And I know Mr. Cosgrove has just a few minutes to address
So
the
you've just
committee as
gone 10 minutes and 20 seconds.
well. And I appreciate the indulgence.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the public before Mr. Cosgrove speaks?
I'd like to speak after.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll
Wait till after.
You want to wait? Anybody else? Public? Okay. Mr. Cosgrove, you get 3 minutes. Please introduce yourself.
Barry Cosgrove, Sandpoint Road. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you very quickly, and thank you for your volunteer service to the town. The whole idea here is supposed to be a balancing of interest, and that arises from your shellfish laws, it arises from your town mission statement, it arises from the orderly developments that are called for from the requirement to coexist, and even the local Shellfish Association says you're supposed to work together, and what we've gotten instead is an attitude that's much more like, hey, I have a permit, talk to the town as if a permit is diplomatic immunity. So what we see is the balance of, you could pay attention to the screen, it may be helpful to you, the balance of interest is shifting. You got more and more and more above water equipment coming in, the residents are being lost in it, and here, if you look here, it's being shoehorned at an industrial scale all over the place in an area that's changed enormously. Now the residents are NIMBY because we're making these observations. We think it's really financially driven, and the balance of interest is being lost. We pointed out this before, so I'll move through it. There seems to be questions about where is this information. So the question we ask is, what has happened from 2007 to 2023? The town eviscerated a permit in a water body that's 10 times the size of the Narrows. There was going to be a needle in a haystack in terms of the volume of gear. Here we have the exact opposite situation. The supply and demand has gone to the moon. You have less space available, more people calling on to use it. And we believe strongly that the obligation of the town is to view the application in the context of the area that's there now. If you look at this space, the entire Narrows is basically taken up by the grants. And I'm willing to bet that if we could turn the clock back, neither the grower nor the town would have ever granted these particular sites. They didn't envision the changes that would occur. Contrast this with the earlier comment today that if you're on the north side, you're lucky enough to get one bag. These people have thousands. Here's the other point I'd like to make to wrap up. If we were here tonight asking for a 2-acre grant to grow oysters in that same area, it'd be no chance. Same thing if we said, hey, we'd like to put a 78,000 square foot dock or some floating facility there. You'd say you're out of your mind. But what you're being asked to do is approve precisely that. They've got 18 acres and a narrow water body, which allows them 78,000 square feet of coverage. Who's going to prevent that? It would be completely out of control. The other point to be made here is this is nothing new to the town, trying to figure out how you balance the interest. And something as critical, for example, as cell towers, which is life and death stuff. Oysters are great, but it's not life and death stuff. Even in that case, there's all these rules about setbacks, reasonableness, and on and on and on, but we don't see any of it. Same thing with a dock. You have to be able to let people go under it. You got to let people go over it. It's got to have lights. It's got to have anti-fouling material. None of this applies to these operations. The Katuitt Oyster Company has opposed docks and floating gear, yet their stuff is exactly what's going on. To wrap up, because I can see you looking at your clock, I just ask this: the gear that they have, the entire industry has shifted to accommodate for this problem. The gear provides optionality. They're in very shallow water. They say they got to be above the bottom. Their gear, when it's sitting on floating from the top, is about a foot down in the water. If they flip it around, it'd be about a foot up from the bottom. The delta is about 12 inches. The fouling implications, the nutrient availability, the temperature changes with scientists we've spoken to are not enough to make it the headache that it is. And furthermore, they have optionality. They've got another 15 acres where it wouldn't be as problematic. The last thing I'd just say, I really wanted to have an opportunity to talk about some young kids that tipped over this summer, and we went out to help them. And that gear was a major problem. Highway right behind there, kids tipped over. The only place to go in the past was this little sort of rest area, and now it was blocked off. The kids, luckily some other adults were there. They're reaching up onto the bags are tipping over on them. It wasn't helpful. It was a hindrance. It was a safety problem. Let me, again, being cut down in this time, I'm going to just go to a couple of points. They're trying to lower their labor costs. It's an economic decision. But here's the question we don't understand. If you look at the performance of this company from seed to market, if you compare it to the 2022 local study, if you compare it to Bill Walton, an expert in the field, saying what you're supposed to do, they're way below. They're not even in the zip code of this. And this isn't a criticism of these guys. It's backbreaking work. It's not a good location anymore. And we've asked, hey, why don't we work together and see if we can't come up with some ideas, some better locations for you, better locations from us. In point of fact, their output is down 30% from when they started to use the gear, to say nothing of the fact that there's been a 9,000% increase of gear in an area that's close to fecal, because of fecal counts. Who fights to keep deer in an area that's closed for fecal reasons when they've got low production anyway? We want to work with them to come up with some better ideas.
I appreciate that. I'm going to cut you off. It's been 5 minutes and 35 seconds. Thank you very much, Mr. Cosgrove. Public? Yes, Chris?
Sure. I'll be brief, but there are a few slides that I wanted to share with you, if I could. There's a few different things that were brought up.
Is that the pictures?
Yeah, if you have them. There's a whole talk about the labor cost and the money and this, but the reality is that, as anybody knows in this room about the conditions that we grow our oysters in, it's changed. So when they reference 1995 to present, as I said yesterday, we used to buy seed, or the Nelsons used to buy seed 1.5 inches plus in size, big seed, and grow it on the bottom. That became financially, just impossible to do, and they suffered serious mortality over the years with crabs and everything else that takes a bite out of the pie. We've, starting when I took over the business, we made major modifications over the years, using racks, using Papalardo bags, which were, something that Dick had that was a rudimentary floating design. He used pine strapping with mosquito mesh nailed to it to grow seed. We've evolved over the years. We've had to make adjustments to the conditions that we live, that we work in, and the areas that we grow our oysters in. Over the last 5 years, we've had to deal with tremendous amounts of fouling on the bottom, especially in the Katuitt Narrows. And because of the limited depth that I have of walkable area along that shoreline, I'm limited to a very small slice that I can work on most tides, but mainly only a negative tide. So this is the result of what a cage looks like after a month of being subtidal, like Mr. Cosgrove has suggested. The whole reason why we eventually had to modify our farm plan was because we couldn't control the fouling. We were losing oyster seed left and right, stunting the growth, having huge sets of tunicates, boring sponge, you name it, affecting the growth of the oysters. Bottom planting, I'm just going to scroll through. This is what's on the bottom in the Katuitt Narrows. I believe Jake Angelo did a slide presentation recently of the amount of boring sponges there. It impacts the shells. I took Mr. Cosgrove and a neighbor out on this boat. I showed him the conditions. I raked stuff up off the bottom and showed him what I was dealing with, and part of the reason why I'm not using the bottom there as much as I would like to. And I took a quahog shell and crumbled it in my hand that was impacted by a huge cluster of boring sponge. Nobody wants to buy oysters that are impacted with boring sponge. It makes it an unusable product. This was a drag that was pulled up in May. As you can see, I'm dealing with gracilaria, all sorts of different kinds of fouling weed, macroalgae that comes in waves. The result of that is smothering. Once the stuff dies out, it smothers the bottom planted oysters and they die. That's another picture of a harvest that we did recently. And, I think the pictures speak for themselves. So to suggest that we aren't able to, that we should just continue to bottom plant like Dick did for 40 years and grow on the bottom, it's not financially feasible. Just like any business, we adapt to new technology. I took Mr. Cosgrove out. I spent 2.5 hours with him and my manager to show him the conditions that we're dealing with out there and to try to explain to him the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. It's not because I'm trying to irritate these people. It's because I'm trying to keep my business a viable business. And this is the only way that we can work. We don't have an intertidal site. We don't get the drying time. So we're not able to control the fouling like guys on the north side do. So we have to live with this and we have to adapt to it, which is what I've done over time, like any business owner would. The pictures that he showed you earlier, of course, of the worst case scenario, yes, we had a line of oyster grows break I was there with my uncle in 40 minutes after receiving a phone call, under 40 minutes, probably more like 25. And I spoke to Ms. Tompkins and apologized to her. We had a broken shackle. It happens. You know, it was unfortunate. There was no damage done, but I did have a conversation with her about that when we were there. This is another picture in front of Mr. Cosgrove's house showing where these are deployed. I have taken my 30-foot by 15-foot barge in and around this area to make sure that he has ample room to navigate to and from. There's plenty of room for any kind of activity that he wants to participate in, and it's well out of the navigational channel. In fact, I pointed that out to him while we were on the boat. It's at least 70 to 80 feet away from the channel. So the talk about it being a navigational hazard, in my opinion, is if you don't know how to run a boat and you don't know how to follow a channel, you probably shouldn't be in one.
How much more time?
Sorry. I'm just going to leave it with this. It really is a function of me adapting to my business. Over the years, I've had to make changes. Anyone who owns a business, I think, will say the same. You know, you've got new technology that evolves, you have to adapt, and that's exactly what I've been doing. And I've been upfront with the town. They're out there. I have people inspecting me from the state. I have USDA, FDA, town, all the time, out on the water, at my shop, inspecting my gear. So as far as I'm concerned, I've been doing what I can and doing the best job that I can to minimize the impacts on all water user groups. You know, so navigation, I don't think is an issue, and I don't know why we keep talking about that. Had plenty of letters. There's probably 18 to 20 letters of support that are in your file from various user groups, from the East Coast Shellfish Growers Association, Mass Aqua. You also have letters from the Katuitt Mosquito Yacht Club. So who have all indicated that it's not a navigational hazard. And in fact, if the stuff if it was submerged like he's suggesting, I'd say it would be more of a navigational hazard or more of a safety issue. So that's all I have to say. I respect, your time, and I hope that you'll understand the decisions that I've made over the years to try to maintain my business. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? No, then we'll close public comment, bring it back to the committee. The letters that you shared in
Yes, so,
support.
yep, I did send, it was, earlier today, and I know people work for a living, but I did send a liquid file share to the members of the Shellfish Committee that have all of the letters of support, the correspondence that started with a letter to the Department of Concern from Leonard Zahn, all the way to most recent correspondence with Attorney Wall. It has the presentations that they presented yesterday. It has all of the letters of support that have come in. It has the copies of his Army Corps permits, the correspondence from Division Marine Fisheries, along with his
That's the list
propagation
of
permit.
letters in support.
Yep. Yeah, so all of this stuff was shared with committee members today via a liquid file share. Because he's home sick with COVID, Jake, who is a Shellfish Committee member, took the time to go through all of it and wrote me an email that he wanted to have read on his behalf in the meeting. It states, "Good afternoon. I just watched yesterday's aquaculture renewal hearing, and the following is my comment for the Shellfish Committee on the topic. I watched the entire aquaculture renewal hearing for the Katuitt Oyster Company this morning. Concerns that were brought up by Oyster Harbor's property owners included, but not limited to, hazard to navigation, interference with other user groups. Oysters in floating gear actually makes the water more polluted, and why can't they simply grow them a different way? I'd like to briefly address those concerns. As far as navigation goes, they're tucked well out of the way and have never been a serious risk to anyone. There is ample room from the docks. Other user groups have no problem navigating and fishing the narrows around the grow-out gear. Commercial shellfishermen go in shore in front of them from time to time and harvest. Recreational fishermen like to rod in real fish around them because the structure will sometimes attract fish. The claim that growing oysters in floating gear contributes to pollution overgrowing on the bottom is far-fetched for me. Finally, the reason Katuitt Oyster Company doesn't grow entirely on the bottom is because I bet they could if they would if they could, but the bottom conditions vary and don't allow it in some areas. I think there are great benefits to the way Katuitt Oyster Company grows their oysters and floating gear. I'm a big supporter of all farms being able to use it in some capacity. Thank you very much, Jacob Angelo.
Great, thanks. Anybody else? Committee? Pat?
Along that shoreline, do we have a percentage of what the growth has been of population and buildings that they've built there over the last, 20 years? And the bottom that is there is a result of overpopulation, not from the ocean itself. That's from us, and it's from the residents around that area that, that whole area where it moves down into the water. We know where that pollution comes from, and that's the culprit here, is the bottom. And they just kept building and building and building and adding new homes and adding to the problem. So I look at that and I go, yeah.
Candy, were you going to say something?
No,
Okay.
I'm listening.
I think that, that you have to take that into account.
Yeah.
It's not
Okay.
the grower, it's the,
Any further discussion in the committee? Al?
No. I
Sure.
would say it's, a lot of it, like she's saying, is because of the nice green grass. The nitrogen, they're putting all the fertilizers, that just goes in there and just creates that bad bottom.
Yeah.
Septic tanks and all that stuff like that. That's what starts that whole bottom to get like that. That's why they're all around here. None of these bays are cleared anymore because of that. So I can see why he's adjusting what he's doing, because obviously you can't grow on that. We all know that.
Can't grow on the bottom, you
You can't
mean?
go on the bottom up there. Where it is right now,
Yeah.
no way.
All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes?
Just a point of clarification, just so that everybody understands. We didn't ask them to all the time grow on the bottom. We asked them just in the busy time of the year, if they could accommodate it by using the gear that's designed so in point of fact, it doesn't sit on the bottom. This is when it floats on top. It's designed, you undo the screw on the side, it fills up, so it in fact would be off the bottom. It would still be very close to where it would be. And we didn't ask them to do it all the time. We just said, look, could there be a reasonable accommodation during the summer months where it's the highest traffic months? Or maybe try it in some of your other spots during the summer. It wasn't like going on the bottom or get lost. It was not that at all. It was a very small request, seasonal, not to go on the bottom, but to go like this and to give it a try and see if that might work either there or in the other areas and be less offensive to the people who are trying to recreate there.
I appreciate that.
Man, just one.
And also,
Please.
I neglected to say, were the letters in opposition included in the file? Amy, you mentioned the letters in favor?
Yeah, I included everything.
Okay, thank you.
So, we're still in the committee, we're not in public comment. As a courtesy, I let Mr. Cosgrove speak. So, our charge at this point is either suggest that we recommend or we don't recommend to the town manager that he approve the application as presented. So I'll entertain a motion. Anybody in the committee wish to make a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the application.
So if I may, just clarify, we don't have the ability to, or authority to approve. We have the ability to recommend or not recommend. So can you recite your motion, please?
I make a motion that we recommend the license to, did I say that right? What did I forgot? The renew, thank you.
So let's see if I understand the motion. Your motion is to recommend to the town manager that this application be approved. Is that correct?
That's right.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded. Any discussion in the committee?
I have a question.
Sure.
If they wanted, who would make modifications if they wanted to make modifications? Just asking, not suggesting a modification.
Amy?
Sure. So, if he wanted to in the future, say, get into doing scallops, as he mentions on the renewal application, that may require a change of gear that he's not typically using right now. So similar to a conversation that we had back in 2018 with a subsequent email request to start using the oyster grows as a new sort of floating technology, which we didn't as a department see as warranting town manager further review and approved in-house. It would be akin to that. If it was something that we thought needed to be more thoroughly vetted, we would recommend town manager approval, which then may, like similar to the floating gear aspect in Barnstable Harbor, require additional vetting through like the Recreation Department, Conservation Department, Waterways, Harbor Master, et cetera, this committee.
Gotcha. Does that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Okay, great. Any further discussion in the committee? We've got a motion, it's been seconded, we've discussed it. I'll close the discussion. All those in favor of the motion that's pending signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries. Thank you. Number 5.2 is a hearing on Virginia Hoax renewal.
Is it Hoek, Dave?
Yes.
Okay.
Ryan Hoke.
Yeah.
Hoek?
Hoke.
Hoke.
Okay.
And you're here on her behalf?
I am.
Would you step to the table or walk to the table?
Can I be seated that tall?
Do you want to go through the application? Okay. You'll just trust me to do it? Okay.
State your name, please.
David Ryan from Katuitt, representing my sister Virginia Ryan Hoke.
And?
And we're here for a renewal for her 2 acres at Barnstable Harbor. It's a 1.5 acre site and a roughly half-acre site. It's a split
And these are-
agricultural license.
These are 2 in north
in-
side, I see.
On the north side, yep,
Okay. So they're not in Katuitt?
correct.
Okay.
No floating gear.
What's Natural Resources say about compliance?
So there's one site that's largely unusable. It's kind of close to Chris Van Duzer's site that has like a channel basically through it. And similar to Mr. Van Duzer, who, wants to continue holding the license and the opportunity that sand shall settle there and make something useful, then that's fine and acceptable as a reason to not meet minimum production values annually. And the other site is used, Dave does all of the paperwork basically for all of those parcels that fall within his family umbrella. And they're up to date, we're in renewal season right now. But I assume that at the end of the month, we'll be up to date with acreage fees and, domicile is required. And we haven't had any issues with boundaries compliance. We've done a number of Katie's done a number of gear inspections out in Barnstable Harbor this year and hasn't been really good at like tagging everything and boundary compliance. Like it's been very good. So we don't have any opposition to renewal of this license either.
Okay.
Then, if I could, one comment on the roughly half-acre part of it that's not being used. I did have a couple of conversations over the past few years with DNR staff about giving that half-acre up as what's happening on that south side of the channel. The sites are kind of eroding away, and they're building up on the north side of the channel. So I think at some point, I would like to formally go through the process to give up the half acre on the south side of the channel and add it a half acre on the north side of the channel, which you've done in the past for other growers.
But the application as presented includes both parcels.
As they've been for the past, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Because Matt held this license prior to her, one of his sons,
Yep.
and transferred, yeah.
Yep. Questions? Committee have any questions for the applicant? No? Public have any questions for the applicant? All right, I'll close public comment, bring it back to us. Same thing. I need a motion to either recommend or not recommend this application be approved by the town manager.
Make a motion to recommend to the town manager to approve this license.
The renewal of this license?
The renewal of this license.
Okay. Everybody understand the motion?
Yes.
I need a second, please. It's been seconded. Great. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it carries. Congratulations and good luck. Presentations, special none, old business, draft aquaculture regulation changes, 407, 50, 54, 57, and 60. What do you got?
Where are we? What am I not seeing here? Where did they go?
I don't know.
Oh my God, I've been putting this together for. Did they get put in here by accident? You've got to be joking. Surely you must be joking. I've spent the past month working on these regulation draft changes for you guys to review. In the T drive, I don't know where they are. No.
Can you do a search?
Only the T drive. This would be where they would be. Oh, thank God. In your own folder. Whew. That was stressful. Okay.
You okay now?
Maybe. I guess we'll see. You guys may not like these draft regulation changes, so we'll find out shortly. Okay, so as I had watched in the last committee meeting, we've had discussions for close to a year now regarding potential regulatory change. Not everybody is landing on the same page in terms of comfortability with scope of proposed changes. I put together a couple of ones that I think we can accomplish in a short period of time together, and offer these for your review, discussion, comment, concerns, editing, all of these things.
And vote on it next meeting?
Or we come back with edited draft, whatever suits the committee.
Okay.
So the first regulation is 40750, filing posting of applicants. Some of this is a simple change. We are now a department, so we can no longer call ourselves a division. I would like to take out the part where the wait lists are kept on an up-to-date copy in the town manager's office, because we are now using Lynx Log and everything is held in our office in that online tool. I'm more than happy to, have those lists at any time anybody asks me for them. All I have to do is go into the online tool and can give them a up-to-date list at that time, because you can apply to be on this list at any point in time during the year. So the rationale for that change is, because we've switched to use of an online database. Next year, commercial permits won't even be signed by the town manager anymore. They'll be generated in this online tool. So there's been a lot of changes as we've moved towards using that online database for everything animal control, Sandy Neck, Shellfish, natural resources, and harbor master related.
So how does the public see that list?
So we don't actually have the list posted officially anywhere. It's currently kept in a file folder in Joyce Persuti's office, and probably isn't at this point up to date because she doesn't have that online tool. What we could do is shift to having the responsibility of the list being kept at my department, so that way anybody who wants to see the list can see it. We could post it online, but the problem with that is that any day of the year, somebody could apply to be on the list, and then it requires creation of a new PDF. You'd have to check it every single day and then make that web request every time. Whereas I'd prefer to have somebody who's interested in seeing the list to just request it, and we can give it to them in real time.
And can we reflect that in this regulation?
I can.
Please.
It currently says, in order of date and application shall be kept on file by Marine Environmental Affairs. It currently says division, but it says department.
Right.
And then it also has the part where it's also kept at the town manager's office. I'm just requesting that we get rid of that so Joyce doesn't have to carry
keep
it
it
anymore.
with you.
Just there.
Discussion? No? Public? No?
That one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that one can go to a vote next month.
This month.
Next month. I want to see it in final.
Okay, let me just make a note.
This month, my eye.
A mover and a shaker. The next regulation is a proposal for 40754, exclusivity of license, subleasing prohibited, transfer of license. I would like to add untimely death of licensee. So the vast majority of the regulation as written would stay the same. What we would be adding is the wording highlighted in bold. Please bear in mind, none of this has been vetted through the legal department because I want all of us to be on the same page before I submit draft regulations to them for wording review. I am not a lawyer. That being said, in the event of the untimely death of a licensee, the license shall continue in full force and effect, subject to the same terms, conditions, and regulations imposed by the original license for a term not to exceed 5 years. This is for the use and benefit of the immediate family of the deceased licensee or a person designated in a will by the deceased licensee. Such recipient shall thereupon file an application under 40758. Therefore, the application shall be treated insofar as apt as a new application. For purposes of this section, the term immediate family shall mean spouse, son, daughter, mother, father, brother, or sister of the deceased licensee. I will say that some of that more legalese was taken from a previously vetted legal, one of our other regulations, not my specific wording. I think this helps to address the conditions of heritability in relation to the untimely death of a licensee and more properly aligns with the state statute.
My comment about insofar as apt,
I don't know. It's
get
from,
rid of it.
okay. Insofar as apt can go.
It just, it's superfluous.
It's in another,
I don't care.
okay. Maybe I should get
My
it out
opinion.
of that one too. Superfluous.
So, let's see if I understand it. We've had that happen, and that's what this is addressing. So, his family can operate it for 5 years?
Yeah, the state statute actually says for 1 year or until expiration of the license, which in this case, in this town, could be 10. We thought that 5 was a reasonable amount of time, say if the person who's inheriting isn't currently domiciled in town, but wants to take on the family business to meet our domicile requirement over that first year, to get the farm, take a look at what you're dealing with here, and then over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, figure out if this is something you really want to do. And at the end of that 5th year, if it's not, you're eligible for a transfer.
If they're in compliance.
If they're in compliance, yeah.
Okay.
But this gives an opportunity, I think, that didn't exist in our regulations prior, similar to what we did with the commercial inheritance for aquaculturists.
Gotcha. Discussion committee?
I like it.
It certainly addresses a hole in the regulations.
It gives you a little more flexibility. Untimely time.
Public? No? Okay. So that's going to be tweaked a little bit and brought back,
Okay.
please?
Okay, next, we have 40757, acreage limitation. A couple of changes here, including getting rid of words that are crossed out and replacing them with words highlighted in bold and adding additional wording highlighted in bold. This is our attempt at a compromise between what we considered to be more request for acreage expansion than we were comfortable with. So it would read, the maximum total acreage licensed to any new licensee shall not exceed 2 acres on the north side and 2 acres on the south side within the town of Barnstable Inner Bays. A new licensee may apply for additional acreage not to exceed 2 additional acres on the north side and 2 additional acres on the south side only after the expiration of the original 5-year license. The maximum total acreage licensed to any existing licensee shall not exceed we would like to switch from 2 to 4 acres on the north side and from 2 to 4 acres on the south side within the town of Barnstable Inner Bays. Switching this to these acreage limitations do not apply to any existing sole call grant now referred to as license, which is in excess of 4 acres and will not prevent the grant holder, now referred to as the licensee, from future renewals or transfers. We would like to add, provided that said licensee abides by all other applicable regulations set forth herewith. All previously permitted 2-acre parcels will remain as such and cannot be combined into larger permitted parcels under one license. So for instance, in a transfer, you would have to, and this wording, I'm comfortable with the idea, I'm not comfortable with the wording, and this is when I think that warrants additional discussion. The rationale is it addresses the want for additional acres for consolidation of existing aquaculture businesses operating on more than 2 acres while balancing the want of other stakeholders interested in getting into aquaculture when possible for it to actually be possible. And those are the people who are on the wait lists. So there was a want to keep all of the 2-acre parcels designated as such on the north side. I think having a new licensee only be able to acquire 2 acres is one thing, but doesn't necessarily jive with people who are then allowed to have 4 and may want to transfer that. So looking for guidance and discussion.
You want to keep them all the same on the north side, in other words, whatever parcels are the parcels.
Exactly. Whatever the license boundaries are that are existing now,
Makes
we
sense.
would keep, but I think it then makes the last sentence not really agree with the first sentence, because when you transfer, the license is now treated as it's a new application. So if you have like 2 individual 2-acre parcels that you want to say transfer to somebody, they'd only be eligible to get the 2. So I don't know.
How you make that work?
Yeah, exactly. So it needs a bit more
Work.
but I like.
I didn't quite get what you just said. I didn't quite get what you said. I mean, I can understand that, but what you just said, I didn't understand.
Well, I just feel like the way that the first sentence reads, that any licensee shall only be eligible for 2 acres, but after 5 years could apply for 2 more. Say if we allow this, and you have 2 2-acre parcels as Al Serpernot, and you want to then transfer that license, that applicant, it's now treated as a new license, so they wouldn't be able to get all 4. They would only be able to get
okay, I see
2.
what you mean, yeah.
So I just don't, I'm conflicted on how to word this in a way that works. So, any thoughts? Welcome.
Committee?
I'm sorry, I'm
You're what?
confused.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, like, if somebody has 2 2-acre parcels, when it comes time to renew, can they renew it as 1 4-acre parcel so they don't have to file all that paperwork?
No, so there are individual licenses for each 2-acre parcel.
Okay.
And that's what keeps them as those individually previously permitted parcels.
But when their renewal is up, if we go to 4 acres, could they then say, let's make it 1 4-acre grant so that I don't have to?
No,
Okay.
we want to keep them as separate parcels.
Why it's
Keeping with the
confusing.
integrity of how it was initially created.
But you want to be able to transfer it to, you're sort of keeping them separate, but not.
Right, yeah. So I don't know, there's like a missing sentence, a missing clarification sentence in there that I'm happy to work on, but this was, after like banging my head against a wall for close to a month, came up with as a starting point, and based on, like close to a year of lengthy commentary period from everybody.
Public? Yes. State your name and go to the mic, please.
Paul Hamlin again. That first sentence there, the maximum total acreage license to any new licensee shall not exceed 2 acres. Why can't that read not exceed 2 2-acre parcels?
Oh, yeah, it could. Yeah,
Solve the problem that you're,
I think so.
yeah.
That sounds like it would.
Okay.
There you go.
Good job, Paul.
Well done.
I think you get a
Make me feel
job.
really smart, man.
Swift.
I got something,
Well,
I was trying to get it out of everybody's way. Now, everybody can get, one person can get 4 acres, basically, is what you're saying now? Is that how it's gonna go?
Right, yeah, so say, in the instance, let's use the Bunnells as an example. So you have Jen, you have Steve, you have Matt, you have Jack. So in an effort to consolidate that, because based on conversations from the existing industry, the idea isn't to like exponentially expand and take over the harbor. The idea is that you want to consolidate what you have mostly for reporting purposes and for ease of running your business. And so if that's the case, then you no longer have to have your like 16-year-old kid holding a license. Two-acre parcels could be in Jen's name, 2 2-acre parcels could be in Matt Bunnell's name, and then you have still Sandy Neck Oyster operating on 8 acres, but with less names involved.
I guess the only thing I'm looking at is let's make sure we don't create a loophole, so you say there's 4 people, so if they did keep them all in those names, could they get 4, the next one get 4, the next one get 4, and the next one get 4?
Yeah, but that loophole already exists.
So let's like not create one, so one person can't get 16, I think, acres.
So then I think
So one
then-
residence.
So then I think Plymouth has a similar regulation to Plymouth or Wellfleet, possibly both, where in that situation where you have like multiple sites, no one company can have an interest in more than a certain amount of acreage.
Is that what you're gonna like write?
I don't know,
into the
like
rule?
this is all just for discussion, so.
so in this instance, it would be family, not company, because we're not in the family, or we're not in the company business.
Right,
Because the way that sounds, if it's not written, they could get 16 acres. I think we kind of all thought before 14 was a little,
right.
very much, so I think maybe we should get some type of limit per household, so that doesn't happen.
I wouldn't limit it to household.
Yeah.
Or how would you, I don't know how would you do it, so, because I think before everybody said 14 was too much. So now we're gonna create a rule that could create a 16 acre?
But
Am
what
I looking at this wrong?
no, I just think that loophole, even with 2 acres, already exists. Like it exists regardless. And if when you transfer, you can only transfer those 4, then you would have to find, if you end up with 16 acres under your umbrella and you want to retire, you would have to find a minimum of 4 people to take that on.
So we're gonna like let this rule go so anybody can get that much?
I don't know.
acreage?
I mean, we're trying to balance the wants of all of the user groups and come up with something, obviously loopholes are going to exist in any regulation that you make. There's always going to be gray area. But this was the type of acreage expansion that we were at least comfortable with taking that risk, giving the people that we currently know that are operating these types of farms in town.
So when I'm hearing Paul, the takeaway is we need to come up with some kind of a limit,
Like a cap.
a cap or limit or something, and that needs to be in language.
And that might be something the attorney can help us with, the town council.
Yeah.
If we tell them what the big idea is.
I mean,
let
mostly
them try to-
people said 14 was too much, so I don't want to think we should create a rule that could also give someone 16.
But to Amy's point,
But,
the loophole exists now.
well, that's why,
Changing it.
that's why we're in here right now. Making
That's why
this
we're
rule,
discussing it.
Because of the loopholes.
So this one, not so much for a vote next
Let's
month,
avoid it.
but a reworking.
Please.
Yeah.
I just have a quick comment on that. I think the people that are for this are trying to also have their business name attached to the license.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
that
down
is-
here, down further.
That's a different topic.
That's
Well, I was just thinking
different.
you could limit the acreage there. So if you're gonna have more than 2 acres in your name, maybe you have to start attaching your business name to that license, and now that business name can only have X amount of acreage.
That's true. That is
Well,
true.
that's the Plymouth and/or Wellfleet example.
Not exactly. So if I may take a side from this real quick.
You going to 60?
No, this is what he's referring to. And you'll have to ignore the fact that, well, you don't have to ignore the fact that it's upside down, because I can fix that eventually. All I asked it to do was change the
Over there.
orientation. No, I know, I pushed it. It just took a while to think about it. Okay. So if you take, for instance, here, and if anyone's really paying attention, you'll notice that in Les Hemela's most recent renewal, I put the wrong license on the number on there. We're getting that fixed currently. So this is what an old license looks like. And prior to like the mid-90s, when they created these regulations, they were issuing a couple of licenses either directly to a company or to a person with the company name on the license. What we're not comfortable with at this point is issuing licenses directly just to the company. But this is what Les Hemela's, minus the fact that that's not his license number, now looks like. It has his name, his position in the company name. And so, you know, Aaron, who has had a renewal, Jared, who has had a renewal, anybody who has an aquaculture license that's tied to a business can make a simple request to me to have their license amended to look like this. Mark Begley had a renewal this year. We changed the wording on his license after the approval of town management. And then he later came and asked for Linda, his wife's license to be reconditioned. The issuance date and the expiration date stay the same, but it's addition of her being a manager for Beach Point Shellfish LLC now on that license. So both license holders are attached to the company. I asked Les, who's not here tonight, like, does this kind of, because I don't know, I don't own my own business, I really work for the government. Would this help you in terms of like the liability insurance issues and stuff that they had been talking about in previous meetings? And he said he thought so. So I think this is a reasonable compromise, because I don't know, the discussions in Wellfleet have gone on for years. This could go on for years. This is something that we can offer now that doesn't require a regulatory change. It would, like, within this one regulation specific to acreage limitation, but any grower could request this change to their license today.
So back to that previous one with
Yeah.
a number of acreage,
Yeah.
I think it has to apply both to an individual as well as to somebody who's attached to a company.
Yeah. So, yeah, need to do more wordsmithing.
Yep.
But does that make sense to everyone?
Questions? Committee? Public? And then you want to do 60,
Yes?
please?
Okay. 40760, amend existing regulation by removing crossed-out wording highlighted in bold and adding wording highlighted in bold. Filing of annual reports requirements for new licensees. So it was, some of the concerns with people coming off the wait list is that they may be complete novices to aquaculture, and we don't want to ruin the brand of Barnstable Shellfish that has, routinely been between number 1 and number 3 in the state in terms of production. So, adding requirements for new licensees. Licensees shall file within Natural Resources in accordance with a form, not the form, because I think we're going to also revisit annual reports and have more than one option moving forward for people that operate on more than one site. That's all the same. The addition would be in the bottom. In addition, new licensees are required to either provide documentation of at least 1 year's experience working in the aquaculture field along with the first year's annual report, or provide documentation that the licensee has taken the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension's farming course or equivalent approved by the Shellfish Constable within the first 2 years of annual reports. So this would be educational requirements or experience requirements for people who come off the wait list. It is land in public domain that gets leased for private use. That is what it is. So it should be available to anyone who resides in this town. We have the wait lists for that reason. So I don't think, requiring that they have a commercial permit and blah, blah, and all of that stuff is really appropriate. But I do think that it's appropriate, along with their first 3 years of seed sales slips, gear purchases, et cetera, to show that they're making an investment on the site that they've acquired, that they also prove to us that you've been in the industry, working in it for at least a year, so have that physical investment in understanding what the nature of the work is, or you take this course and get to understand what the nature of the work is before you go out there.
Committee? How about verifiable documentation?
Yeah.
How do you prove it? I just sign a letter that says, yeah, I did the work, or she did the work.
Well, that would be similar to in terms of the 1 year of work on a farm, we could put together, like similar to the apprentice program, like how are we going to make people prove that they did 400 hours of the work? That's something that we can discuss further and kind of suss out.
Yeah.
The cooperative extension, you get a certificate for going through the course.
I get that, but, it's the private person who does it privately. How do you verify that they actually did the work?
Would you have pay stubs?
Not necessarily, I wouldn't think.
Well, that's
Really?
that's why you have all the, regulations as far as how much product you have to buy or
No,
money
this
you have
is-
to spend.
This is
I don't-
somebody
You know,
else.
it's your money. If you want to blow it, then you may want to learn something before you put the money down.
I agree, but you don't want them to be the Vibrio, carrier and ruin everybody else.
So then,
It's a
What
tough
about a
one.
mentor program? And then the mentor qualifies that they did the work.
or we just make them take the course, and then
Yeah.
you have something verifiable
That's probably.
and get
That
rid of the
means
first part of the sentence.
3 months or 2 months or whatever. I don't know how long.
It's coming up
course is.
again in 2024. They've been offering
Makes
it
more
almost
sense.
every
I mean,
year.
it's certainly verifiable.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay.
Public? No, okay.
So that one potentially with removal of that could come back for a vote next month?
Yeah, potentially.
Okay.
We'll see.
Hey, thank you. And so, just to end, because we're not going to keep this as like an old business type thing, I will continue to work with growers because I feel like some of this stuff can be discussed here loosely because this is a great place for people to discuss these types of things, but some of this I also think is going to have to be handled in a separate working group, like by the growers themselves, because you know your day-to-day operations and how you would like your annual report to look way more than I do. So there was the one license thing that we already covered. Increase in annual aquaculture fees is being handled by Nina and Finance. I have no idea where that will go or when that information will come out, but when it does, she'll be the one presenting it, not me. Changes to minimum production standards. Not all farms are the same in size, species of shellfish grown, management of licensed space, and farm operations. What does minimum production mean in the 2020s? Versus what it meant 5, 10, 20 plus years ago. What should these standards be now? Should they be updated to reflect the current state of aquaculture in Barnstable? It's a question I'd like everyone to think about between now and next month. Changes to annual reports, although annual reporting is required to establish as the sites are meeting minimum production standards each year. Discussion should take place around reporting for a 2-acre farm versus reporting for a farm operating on perhaps 3 to 8 acres and then 8+ acres. I don't know. I just know that people hate the annual reports, but you have to do them because we have to see something that shows that you're meeting a minimum production requirements. So I'm happy to think tank that with anyone who has suggestions. If you're a small farm, you're a big farm, what do you want your annual report to look like? And how can we make it look that way to show that each site is actually being utilized? That's it.
Questions? Anybody have any questions from the committee? Yeah, Pat?
I'd just like to know where I can sit down and read this at my leisure.
I can,
Email?
same through Liquid File Share, send all of this stuff to committee members and anyone else who is interested in having it tomorrow via
Yes.
email.
Please do.
Okay.
Thank you. Al, did you have a statement?
Probably the last one you'd have to make it on an acre basis, you know. As
The
far
last
as-
point
as
you're
far as
talking-
Whatever your minimum production all that stuff would just have to be on an acre. You know, you get 1 acre, you get 100 acres, it's, per acre.
Okay. Well, that's what it currently is, but the way that the regulation currently reads is that it's $4,000 per acre marketable product. And say, for instance, if you are growing exclusively cohogs and you have 2 to 3 different sites, one of your sites may be exclusively seed that year. So can we amend that regulation to include like a total investment
be
of
just a-
product and not necessarily marketable product? Can we amend that to be more reflective of some of the farm operations that take place?
Yeah, like, in other words, total acreage, meaning it doesn't make any difference where they are. It's just, if you get, $10,000 in sales, then that's 10,000. Whether it's on site 1, 2, 3, or 4, doesn't make any difference.
So I think the issue with that then is,
Because just what you said, you
It's-
might have seed over here and market stuff over here and other seed over here and.
we still want to see that, like, so say it's that 1 acre and you have $1,000 worth of seed there. We still want to see it as like a line item per site that you're meeting that minimum production value. But I don't think that it should be tied exclusively to market-bound product anymore.
No, it should be through seed, and then it's got to be several different, because if you start out, let's say you get a grant. So the first year, you're going to buy seed. So your investment is really what the minimum is going to be.
Right, and that's the way the regulation currently reads, is that for the first 3 years of the original license, you have to, with your annual report, obviously, you probably don't have, $4,000 per acre of production of like product value. So we're requiring that you show us like that amount invested in seed, gear, etc. So I'm just saying, like, why in situations where you have people that may be using various sites, if they hold more than one, there may not be any market-bound product on that site, but we still need to see proof that the, value, that it's still being used, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
Do you understand?
I think it's hard to get away from an acre per acre situation.
I think it still can be. I just think that we need to be a little bit more broad in terms of like what we consider production, like what we assign the
I
value
think you
to.
can up the, as you can up the numbers to cover the, instead of 4,000, make it 10,000 or whatever. Because then that goes into sales, that becomes a sales number. So if you have 6 acres and you got, $100,000 worth of sales, that's, 15,000 an acre or whatever.
Chris, you had a question? Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much,
And
Chairman.
If I may, are you our liaison now?
No, not
Maybe.
been assigned, yeah, perhaps.
Okay.
Chris Clark,
Sorry.
Town Councilor. But thank you very much for that presentation and for all the work you've done on this, Amy. But it occurred to me when I look at the website, and for the benefit of the public, there's a tab that says resources. Could you put the draft regulations there for not only this body, but for others who might be interested?
So typically we only do that once we're to the point that everybody's happy with the wording of the draft. And then we put it up for a period of time. I usually try to have it up there for at least a month so that people can comment ahead of what would be a public hearing. Once we iron out like that everyone's comfortable with the wording of the draft at the committee level, I have no problem posting it on the website for people to look at. We have to do that ahead of public hearings anyway, so that way the public, if they don't attend these meetings, has an opportunity to see them and provide comment ahead of any changes that take place.
Understood.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anything else, Amy?
What else is on here? I don't have anything under that old business.
Status of the repair of Scudder Lane. What's going on with Scudder Lane? Great.
It's there. I haven't had any subsequent meetings. I know, like, a company was hired. They had 2 different versions that everybody saw. Nobody really liked them. That's still where we're at.
I might be able to add to that.
Okay,
I think
great.
there was a little bit of glitch with American with Disabilities Act and how they were going to interface the, access to the landing or wet sand, which is kind of troublesome. But that's what I heard. Thank you.
And when would we figure the work will be done? Winter of '24 or
No
winter
idea.
of '25?
No idea.
Okay. Great.
But we do have a commitment that they'll come before the people.
Mark, introduce
comment.
yourself, please.
Mark Worton, West Barnstable. I wanted to bring to your attention the intersection of Route 6A and 132 on the map. Back in the 1930s, the state came in and decided to straighten Route 6A and put in an underground drainage system to drain about a mile of road into the Great Marsh. You see those two islands there when you're parked at the end of Route 132. The road originally was on the south side of those islands. It went east and west, but the state pushed back the hill, created the islands, created the westbound lane of 6A, and kept pushing until they made a sidewalk. That's how they straightened 6A, but they started digging trenches at that point and created an underground drainage system that flows out into 1780 Route 6A to the, and where you see the blue, right there where the blue is, which is to the west of Buttonwood Lane. Now, about 15 years ago, Patrick Page asked me to come over to his house, and I did on that particular day, and it had rained the day before. So he says, come on over to the edge of my lawn and take a walk out about 20 feet into the grass. So I walked out, and my feet started to squish in the moisture in the water, and I looked down because by now it was a sunny day, and you could see the colorful petroleum product at the top of the water because all the road runoff during the rain, cigarette butts, nips, pollution, litter, ends up in his yard. So I said, well, that doesn't look very good. He goes, no, and my well is right over here about 80 feet, and it's 20 feet down. It's in my basement. He said, but if I were a shell fisherman, I'd be even more worried during the heavy rains, because during the heavy rains, there's a 15-inch drain that comes out into his yard from all that road runoff, and it shoots down past Carl Mackey's property, under the railroad tracks, into Brickyard Creek, and then out into the marsh, into our fin fisheries and our shell fisheries. So there's a potential pollution problem here that's been going on for 90 years. So I figured we're approaching the 100-year anniversary, so maybe we can ask the state to fix the problem they created way back when. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I've gone to the town council. I went to the Barnstable Association of Recreational Shell Fishermen. I went to the county commissioners. I had some girls from APCC out there looking at the property the other day. I had Steve Exaros out there last weekend in the rain during the Patriots' wonderful 6-0 loss. So we put boots on the ground because he hadn't seen where it was. So I'm just passing this information on to every group I can find, because if you think about what happens in the winter during the snowstorms, the state highway comes down from Sandwich, and they come down to that intersection, and they take a nice big loop around and dump their sand and head back to Sandwich. Yarmouth comes down, same thing. 132 comes down. Oak Street, the town hires the sanders to come down. So we got 4 dumps of sand in that intersection anytime it snows or rains or sleets and freezes up. So the amount of sand and salt that's been flushed into the Brickyard Creek has got to be significant for 90 years. So I'm hoping enough of us can write letters eventually to the state, to the DOT in Taunton. We're District 5 down here, and possibly even to the governor to get something going, because we've got to fix this problem.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. The hour's late. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
It's been moved, seconded. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Thank you all for attending.